All right, all right. Happy Tuesday. This is actually March 26, 2024. Glenn Stein, broker owner, realty executives in Ocala, located on Silver Springs Boulevard. And today we're going to be talking about what's going on in the Marion County, Florida, Ocala, Florida market, what's happening there. And obviously, we've seen some big news impacting real estate agents and the National Association of Realtors. We're going to talk about, is it making it more expensive or less expensive, or maybe somewhere in between, um, for sellers and buyers. So we're going to talk about that. The first thing, let's jump into it. Let's jump into what's going on in the market right now, because I think that is always interesting to see what's happening. And I think the first thing we look at is, months of inventory. I pulled this up recently, where wanted to see what it looked like. What did the months of inventory look like? What are we talking about? What are we talking about? The number of properties for sale uh, for uh, for Ocala, Marion County. And based on what we're seeing here, this is 10 years ago, this is 2014. You're looking at, just coming out of the recession, real estate recession, looking at, nearly, over 10 months supply of homes, but really probably about average in this year, about 9. And then, it would spike up. Typically, this happens the early part of the year where the inventory spikes up because not much is happening in December. And then every year you're seeing this, right? Up, down, up, down, up, down. But if you pay attention, take away the peaks and really look at the troughs here, you'll notice that ever since 2014, the days on market has been reduced. The amount of time on market is reduced, but also the number of properties that get absorbed, the absorption rate. And what that typically means is if you take the number of homes on the market, right now we're looking at, we're about 30, just over 3,300 homes in Marion County available. If you look at like this year and right now, it would take about just under 6 months time to actually eliminate all the inventory if no new homes came on the market. So we're seeing about 500 to 600 homes sell every single month in Marion County, based on what we're seeing the first couple of months of this year, first quarter of 2024. If we look at past years, if we look at last year, obviously it was about, and we haven't seen the trough yet, right? We're in that peak period. The trough of last year, you're basically looking at about 3 months supply of homes. In 2022 is about 2. In 2021, it's definitely around 1, 1 month or less as far as the time spent on market and the amount of inventory versus how many new homes were coming on the market. So the pace of sale is what this indicates here, like really, really fast. And last year we saw it was not nearly as fast, but it was still better than probably about 2019, so pre-2020 numbers. If you look at it, this is the cadence of the speed of how things were selling. Now, we'll know more when we get to about probably May, June of this year about where this is going to be, because we're starting to slide down as far as how fast things are going to start selling. We're starting to pick up speed because we're in the spring market. It's basically what this means. So don't get confused. This is an average sales price. Prices are pretty much holding steady right now, although inventory has gone up. And I'm looking at this, about a year ago, we were about 2,600 homes on the market. So that was the cadence of sales about a year ago, right there. You're looking at that part in 2023. If you take a look at that and blow it up a little bit more, hopefully that's a little bit better, right? So that says a lot. I think we're moving towards more of a normal average, probably around the 2017 through 2019 mark is about what we're probably heading towards. But depending on what happens with interest rates, that's going to be an impact for sure. So let's look at the other thing I want us to look at is we saw about 10 days ago uh, kind of semi-official word that the National Association of Realtors has settled their lawsuit with the big group class action lawsuit from several years back, and finally has come to fruition where it looks like NAR didn't admit guilt, but basically said, okay, we need to protect our members, and we need to say that we're willing to make some changes. And some of those changes are this. One change is we're going to be looking at in MLS probably mid-July or a little bit later. We're going to be looking at what we used to do is have commissions on MLS. Commissions would be stated on MLS, meaning if you listed a property, I'm really talking about this right here, compensation offers moved from MLS. If you listed a property, and what typically would happen is you would get charged a certain percentage by the listing agent. The listing agent would then offer a certain amount, which was all negotiable, and that was put onto MLS as an offering to the buyer's agent who had a buyer, and if a executed contract occurred and a closing occurred, then the listing agent would get paid from that pool of money, and the buyer's agent would get paid from that pool of money. So what's going to happen is that is no longer going to be the case where it's going to be listed on MLS. So it's likely, and it's not official yet, but it's likely going to come in a different form, meaning that we may see it in the form of a seller concession, meaning a seller may decide instead of putting commission in there that they're going to pay part of the buyer closing cost, or some kind of buyer cost. The other thing that's going to be mandatory, likely after mid-July, is going to be a written agreement for MLS participants acting for buyers, aka a buyer brokerage agreement, which basically says that the buyer's agent shall get paid a certain amount. Now, that certain amount could still come from the seller in a buyer cost, and a seller concession, seller cost taking care of a buyer cost. So seller could take care of that. Could be negotiated in the deal. It could also be negotiated, maybe partial payment from the seller, partial payment from the buyer, or it could be a payment from the buyer. That's what could happen. Like, for your services of negotiating our deal, helping us navigate through the process, help us negotiate not only price, but negotiate terms such as escrow amount, financing terms, closing dates, inspection periods, inspection items, what should be repaired, what shouldn't be repaired, closing dates, and so on and so forth. And there's several other things that a buyer's agent does, including bringing in a lot of information and making sure you have a smooth transition, and you have the necessary information, and they represent you to the fullest. And that's going to be another thing that could come about, which we'll talk about later, maybe another video where we're going to talk about representation. But the big thing I want to talk about today, so that's kind of what the NAR thing is, right? Like, you're hearing a lot of things about, the death of real estate, the death of commissions, and all these things that are going out, whether it's the Wall Street Journal or CNN or Fox News or whatever. The big thing is that we don't know exactly whether, how it's going to look exactly, on whether there's going to be a increase in how much things cost. There's been speculation that home prices will go down because of this. And I want you to think about this for a second. We start analyzing what's going to happen. You've got a $500,000 home, and the $500,000 home pays X percent to the listing agent. And let's say the seller decides, I'm not going to pay anything on the buyer side, buyer agent side, buyer brokerage. And they decide, okay, fine, we're not going to pay anything. And the buyer agent comes in and says, okay, they'll ask the listing agent, is there any money and any commission? And they're like, no, there's no commission. You have to negotiate with your buyer. And the buyer says, no, I can't pay you, or I'm not willing to pay you. What's going to happen? Buyer will go to the listing agent. Okay, so that means the listing agent will likely have full representation with the seller, and the buyer is not going to get any representation at all because they're not offering any money. which some people can handle. I'll admit there's some people that can do that. There are certain people that will sell their home by owner and do it themselves. So there is always a level of a percentage of people that will do it themselves, for sure. This is a very complex transaction. And I think people I think what's happened in the industry is that it's made to look easy, and none of it's easy. If you were to sit with me or one of our agents or a broker and look at what they do on a daily basis, it's not the simplest thing to actually navigate personalities and to navigate contracts. But let's say that in this case, that's what happens. Buyer goes straight to the seller or the listing agent. And everybody thinks, okay, well, we saved some money, right? Didn't have to pay another commission. The seller basically can say, all right, well, since you're not helping the buyer, you're just helping them navigate this process, but not really offering too much service. And we're going to save the money. We're going to save 3% or 2.5% or whatever. Well, okay, seller saves some money. What about the buyer? What happened with the buyer? The buyer probably paid as much in this case as they normally would, because it's an open market. They're looking at other homes. So that's definitely a possibility, but it's also very possible that they paid more than what the property's worth, especially if an appraisal is not attached to the deal. Now, sometimes with FHA and VA, there's appraisals that are attached to this that make it contingent upon an appraisal and financing, but sometimes they're not. And if there's a cash deal, a conventional deal, and appraisal is not necessary in certain cases, then it's definitely possible the buyer could overpay because you've got a listing agent that is negotiating strongly on the behalf of the seller, and that could occur. So there are a couple of options. It's possible the seller may save some money. It's possible that the buyer could overpay. It's also possible that it works out in the end and nobody realizes what's going on, and that's probably typical. It sells and then nobody realizes if it was a benefit or not. They just, okay, we felt like we saved money. But a lot of times what typically happens is the agent that is willing to work for less is likely not going to be as strong as an agent that might get a little bit more money and incentivized. So they might be incentivized to negotiate stronger on the seller half or the buyer half. They might be able to help you navigate better and give you appropriate comps. And by the way, Zillow is not an appropriate comp, but really look at the marketplace and see what other properties are selling for. Maybe we can get a little bit more. And I think that's also part of the service. You also might see a situation where the buyers themselves are saying, wait a second, I'm going to negotiate this, or the buyer's agent may negotiate this and say, okay, seller, since you're not paying any buyer brokerage fee, then we're going to actually reduce the price by an additional 3% more than what we're thinking, because you're not paying for a buyer broker. You're not offering any money. You're saving the money. We want that money. So it's up in the air. It's all for negotiating. So it is a question to be curious to see what you think. I could see it pretty much all the way around. I think my recommendation is this. If you are one that is very savvy and you're experienced in buying homes, not just you bought a home this year, but you've bought 10 homes and you're a savvy investor, I can see where you can save some money and be okay and negotiate on your behalf and do the research yourself and do all the homework and make sure that you're buying the appropriate home and get a home inspection and termite inspection and understand what the contracts are saying and understand your rights and what rights you don't have and what rights you do have. And if you're sophisticated enough, I think you can do this. You can maybe save some money. Just like there are for sale by owners that save money because they're sophisticated enough to actually get it done. They know what they're doing. They know how to market. They know how to find a buyer. But at the same time, if you don't know what you're doing, just like anything else, it's just like, I may be able to cut my own hair because I don't have any hair. But some people that have a lot of hair are not going to be able to cut their own hair. They might try, but they're not going to look as good as if they got a stylist or an attorney, trying to represent yourself, or a doctor trying to self-diagnose yourself, or you're trying to cut your own grass and you've got a busy schedule and you don't have time. So that I think I think we've got to analyze what it is that is entailed in this, and I would really look at start interviewing your agents and make sure that the agents have a real plan behind them. Do they have not only a brokerage agreement, but also a presentation for you to outline how this is going to work and how we can help you sell or how we can help you buy a home? So did it become more expensive or less expensive? And I tend to think that in a market like ours, in a capitalistic market, I think it's going to come out even in the end, right? I think it's all going to work out. Are people going to be able to save money? I think there are cases where it might be less expensive. And then in certain cases, it might be more expensive and you will never know it because you're not going to hire an expert. It's kind of like the situation where you're going out there and you're trying to cut your tree down because you've got a chainsaw, but you've never done it before and you're not experienced. And you cut the tree down and hits a power line or hits your house or hits a car, cause damage, or you spend so much time on it, it wasn't worth it. This is exactly like that, right? If you know what you're doing, it's okay. If you don't know what you're doing, find an expert. So if you have questions, let me know. You can connect with me. I'm the broker here at Realty Executives, 352-572-3796. We also do property management. We do rentals as well. So if you need help, let us know.